Hello and welcome. Yeah, this is a pretty interesting topic. Since Christmas is coming up, I decided to do a video on this. When was Jesus actually born? It wasn't December 25th. There isn't not a lot of there isn't a lot of evidence for the December 25 date. So I found this article that goes quite in depth. Has actually has sources cited at the end as well on why it was more than likely not December 25th and that there are other dates proposed using actual Bible verses and historical information. So, first of all, what is the best guess? Now, in this article, they say September 29th was the more likely date, and they're saying in the year 5 BC. So it wasn't actually, uh, you know, zero AD. In fact, zero AD doesn't actually exist. After 1 BC, you would have 1 AD actually. I like the September 29th date because this is very similar to what I learned when I was in Bible school, kind of the evidence I had. And so I do agree with that date. It's a pretty good guess. Personally, I would say what I learned was that it was probably either mid to late September, maybe late October. I mean, not a late, early October. So somewhere from the middle of September to early October, if you want to make it, like that. But the evidence here says September 29th. I kind of like that date. There are reasons for it that we'll go into. And the year is actually a little different too. Because our calendar isn't perfect. But they didn't always keep good records in the old days, so Jesus's birthday is probably off by a few years actually. So anyway, so the first, so there's a lot of evidence here. I'm not going to read every single thing written here, but I'm just going to summarize what the article says. So first of all, shepherds were in the fields in like they were probably the shepherds were probably not in the fields in December. December was rather cold. It was not really a fun time to be outside. So shepherds generally wouldn't be doing that in late December. They are winter months. It is pretty cold. Now, however, it says here that they were usually outside from maybe April to October. um, they were, they had their flock, but in December they would have, brought them back home, and and sheltered them. That's what it says here. But yeah, so basically they would have been outside of summer from April to October when the weather was better. It was kind of cold. People weren't really outside, and that's kind of one of the main arguments against the December date is because the information presented in the Bible shows that, um, you know the things that happened couldn't have happened in December. The other argument, also once again dealing with the weather, is about the census. Um, it was cold, so the census was not taken in December. The generally right here it says generally a census would take place after the harvest season around September or October, which goes quite well with the September 29th date we were talking about. So once again, it's cold. They weren't asking people to travel back to their hometown in December. It just wasn't. It was just not safe. It was unpleasant. Uh, you know, it would have been better to do it right after the harvest season. That is how generally things were done. So those are like the two. Those are two of the arguments. I'm sure there's plenty of other arguments against the December date, but these are just the two, and they mostly deal with the weather. Weather just was not that great. People weren't really, uh, you know, it was not a really good time to be traveling in December. So generally, September or October were the preferred dates. Let's see now. What about the year? So there is also argument about the year. So in 525, Pope John the commissioned a scholar to establish a feast calendar for the church. So, first of all, it didn't happen immediately. It was like it wasn't immediately like, oh yeah, Jesus was born December 25th. So for the first 200 years, there was literally like no mention of the calendar date of Jesus' birth, and it wasn't really until 336 that they actually try to get a date. So this is really a Catholic thing. It was the Catholics or the Eastern Orthodox that tried to come up with a celebration of Jesus's birth. Before them, nobody tried to do that. Actually, basically it is a Catholic idea, and unfortunately, like a lot of things, Catholics messed it up. Um, so at first there was actually a lot of debate. A lot of church leaders didn't even want this. I think even Origen, and Origen wasn't even that great of a guy. He actually has had. I mean, I know the stuff he was doing. Origen was actually a really bad scholar, but I actually have to agree with him on this. He said that in the scriptures, no one is recorded to have kept a feast or held a great banquet on his birthday. It is only sinners who make great rejoicings over the day in which they were born into the world. That is really interesting because, we're all about celebrating our own birthdays, but Origen here is really criticizing this thing about birthdays. And in the Bible, there's actually no really good reference to birthdays. Every time birthdays come up, something bad happens or someone dies. Like, there's really the Bible doesn't make good mentions of birthdays, and I'm kind of surprised that Origen said this because Origen was a very bad scholar. He actually screwed up the Bible, and he screwed up a lot of Bible translations. So he was a terrible scholar. We have a lot of our. That's why we have so many. One of the reasons we have so many problems with our modern Bibles is because of this guy. This guy really messed stuff up. So I'm actually surprised that he made this quote. That's actually, so it really is kind of interesting. So even the worst scholars can say something smart sometimes. Basically, he's saying it's not a good thing. We shouldn't be doing this. And there are actually a lot of church leaders that are opposed to this. They're saying Jesus wouldn't have wanted this. He didn't care about this. He was a humble man. Why? And there was a lot of arguments. Eventually, they came up with December 25th. There's probably a lot of arguments into why, but this is not a good date. This actually aligns very close to the winter solstice, and this was a sun worship. Basically, this was a pagan holiday, and yeah, maybe it's off by a few days, but like this literally has something to do with the winter solstice. So it's not a really good reference. They went with this date. There were a lot of arguments. They weren't. Not everybody wanted this date of December 25th. There were a lot of arguments. Like someone said March 28th. That's actually probably a much better guess than December 25th. It's in March. And there are a lot of other, there's a lot of debate about it. If you want, like, I'm going to post a link to this article. You can read the whole thing if you want later. So December 25th became popularized by Pope Liberius in 354. And then, in 435, it became the first Christ Mass. That's basically what Christmas means. It is Christ Mass. So you can literally see the Catholic influence within the word, okay? Like it's right there, Christ Mass. This coincided with the date of celebration of Romans to their primary God. Oh, wow. Yeah, see, I just read that. So anyway, you can read it. You can get all the good details here, but literally, there's nothing Christian about this date. It is a worldly date. It has a lot to do with these pagan holidays. December 25th. Basically, yeah. So it is related to the sun god. They just replaced it. Instead of worshiping sun god, we're just going to replace it with Jesus. Let's see. Then next, is there any evidence from the Bible that will help us fix the date and year of Christ's birth? There is. So I'm not going to go into all the details, but I will tell you this is very much what I learned when I was in Bible school. So in Luke 1, 5 through 17, you can learn about Zechariah and Elizabeth and how John the Baptist were supposed to have been born. And then here you can find out that Zechariah, which, the dad of, John the Baptist, he was from the division of Abijah. It does mention that. And then if you go back into First Chronicles, you can actually figure out like when they would have served in the temple, when that order would have served in the temple. Then you can get a lot of other evidence here, but basically all the priesthood divisions would serve during Passover and the days of unleavened bread. Um, so basically, what it comes down to is that John the Baptist, like to make a long story short, John the Baptist would have been born either in March or September using this information based on the dates. Now, we know that later you find out that John the Baptist is 6 months older than Jesus. So basically, it kind of goes back and forth. So if John the Baptist was born in March, Jesus was born in September. If John the Baptist was born in September, Jesus would have been born in March, which is why the March 28th date from earlier actually sounds a lot better than the December 25 date. But with more evidence, information, you find out that it was John the Baptist born in March, and Jesus was the one born in September. Um, so anyway, we have more verses here backing up that information. Yeah, so you need a little bit of math. You have Bible verses. Look, it's just Bible verses, really. Like, this is Bible verses showing you this stuff with a little bit of historical information. That is generally how the best way to come up with the correct answer is to trust the Bible, what the Bible says, the information in the Bible, plus use some outside historical information that helps give you a little more details and backs up the Bible. And that's it. That's generally how you come up with the correct answer instead of whatever, I don't know, they were doing back in 3 or 400 BC. I mean, 3 or 400 AD. Like, I don't know what the Catholic Church was doing. This is how you generally come up with the correct answer, not just for dates, but literally any doctrine, Bible doctrine. This is the correct way to do it. You stick with the Bible. If you need some outside historical information, when applicable, use it. But that's generally how you're supposed to do this stuff. Um, that's the most logical way to approach, studying the Bible. So Feast of Tabernacles. Basically, through a lot of other information here, they come up with the September 29th date, which is a very good date because that is the first day of the Feast of Tabernacles, or otherwise known as Sukkot or Sukkot, is a high day, a special Sabbath, a time of rejoicing. So that's significant. That makes a lot more sense rather than December 25th, which is some sun pagan god worship day. September 29th, the first day of the Feast of Tabernacles. It's an actual holiday they already had. That makes so much more sense as the day of Jesus' birthday. And it actually lines up with the evidence we have. So, and then anyway, this is this is the established date. I kind of like this interpretation. So it being the first day of the Feast of Tabernacles, or approximately September 29th. And then there's a lot of other information about it, sources, then, Magi from the East. Anyway, it's basically there's a lot of information, plus more information on the year of Jesus's birth. Yeah, I think I didn't really explain that yet. Yeah, the year of Jesus's birth, but basically, there's more information here on the year of Jesus' birth. But basically Herod the Great died in 4 BC. And so Jesus must have been born before that. Basically, that's the evidence here. So using the data, information we have historically, Herod the Great would have died in 4 BC. So Jesus would have, had to have been born 4 BC or even before that, potentially. That's why he's saying 5 BC, because he's saying it was the year before Herod the Great died. So that makes the most sense. It wasn't like 1 AD or something. So yes, our calendar is a bit off. Our evidence, because it was very hard to keep good records back then. So, but we do know Herod the Great would have died about 4 BC. So for Jesus, that's why 5 BC is a good enough guess. I can't argue with what the person's saying in this argument, in this article. Yeah. So anyway, that's basically why we're going with the September 29th date. I'm not going to read the rest of this. I was just summarizing most of the article. So I'm going to post a link if you're interested in this. Give it a read. But basically, I'm going with the September 29th date. I like the evidence for it. It makes much more sense to say it's the first day of the Feast of Tabernacles. So anyway, I'll see you next time.